So you got yourself a shiny used bike on Facebook Marketplace. Well, before you start riding going crazy, there's a couple mechanical things you definitely want to check over, especially if you don't know the history on the bike or don't have maintenance records with it. Today I'm going to take you through steps, precautionary stuff, safety related items. So a lot of it should be pretty self-explanatory, but you would be surprised the stuff that's overlooked maintenance wise on bikes. So if you do potentially have a mechanical failure on a motorcycle, unlike a normal car, it could be potentially life-threatening. So it's extremely important just to check over some of the basics on a bike and make sure it's good to ride. So here I have a 2014 Triumph Street Triple R that I picked up, and it actually looks like a pretty mechanically sound bike, pretty well taken care of, but there are some glaring issues when I started diving into this thing, and just super basic maintenance stuff that the previous owner didn't do on this thing. So I'm gonna take you through some of the stuff and what to look for. First thing is tires. This is the only thing between you and the road. So obviously making sure the tires are in good condition is extremely important. What to look for? There should potentially be a date code on the tire. If it's more than a couple years old, or you see potentially signs of dry rotting, usually in between here, it's time to replace the tire. And in my case, this has pretty flat spotted in the center just from, it looks like, daily riding this thing. And you can tell by a motorcycle tire, especially in the rear, how hard it's been ridden, looking at these quote unquote chicken strips. So you can see how far they've leaned over on the bike, and that's a general sign of how hard they are riding. If they're just commuting on the bike, usually get a flat spot just in the center. If they're ripping this thing in the canyons all the time, this will be nice and worn all the way to the edge, or it's been tracked, it's usually worn to the edge as well. So that's a good indicator of the previous history of the bike and how hard it's been ridden. The other thing to check with tires is to make sure they're properly inflated to the manufacturer recommended air pressure. A lot of people don't check their tires, especially when temperatures increase or decrease. That can have a lot of effect on tire pressure. And motorcycles are very, very sensitive to tire pressures, especially front to rear. It can cause a lot of handling issues, unbalanced issues, and again, you could wind up in a ditch just based on tire pressure being a little bit low or too high. Second thing you want to check is your braking system. So first thing I look at is to make sure that the fluids are at the correct level. And a lot of times if the fluid is looking very brown, so you can see here, this fluid not looking the greatest, I'll probably end up replacing the fluid here. But making sure the levels are correct and the fluid is nice and clear. Then going up to your brake pads, you're gonna wanna look in there. Sometimes it's a little tough and there's a little wear indicator. So let me show you on a brand new set of pads what that wear indicator looks like. So see these little grooves in here? If you can no longer see the groove on the brake pad on your current ones, it's time to replace the pads. So you're gonna wanna check the rears as well. And if you've ever taken the motorcycle safety course, you would know that you always want to apply front and rear brake consistently. So if the previous owner was just hitting the front brake, which is very newbie thing to do, kind of like in my condition, my front pads were very worn and my rear was barely even touched. So again, you want to make sure that you check over your brake pads. The other thing with your braking system is a lot of bikes will have this adjustment on the brake itself of how far the handle comes out, and you can also rotate the entire assembly up or down. So if you're a short rider, you would end up making this go up and your reach and ergonomics would be a little bit better. If you're a very tall rider, usually you want this pointing down a little bit more, this handle. And again, you can hit this dial to bring this in or out depending on how far you can reach. So Whatever's comfortable for you is gonna be best here. Moving on to suspension, and this is the most overlooked thing when people get a brand new bike. They'll buy the bike and just ride it as is. Now, motorcycles, unlike cars, are supposed to be set per your rider weight. So what you wanna do is get into full spec riding gear. If you wear a backpack with a lot of equipment in it or whatever, water bottles, fill everything up like you're gonna go ride, and you're gonna wanna get another person to help you with this probably. And what you're gonna wanna do is measure what's called suspension sag or static sag. Now, their first measurement is going to be, and it's gonna be taken front and rear. So you're gonna lift up the bike as high as you can while the tire is still touching the ground and all the suspension is completely unloaded. Take a measurement from the swing arm to a static point on the back of the bike, and then you're gonna sit on the bike, get all your weight on the bike, so foot on the pegs and everything, and have someone hold you on the bike, or maybe a front stand or something like that. But you're gonna wanna sit on the bike and then take a second measurement. Now, the difference between those two numbers is gonna be your sag. And what you generally wanna aim for on a motorcycle is for track use, it's like around 20 millimeters of sag. And then for normal street riding, you can probably get away with 30 or 40 millimeters of sag, front and rear. Now, just like you would balance a car, a motorcycle is the same way. So your sag numbers, depending on how you get them, you're gonna wanna have the same sag numbers front and rear. So what you would do to adjust that is your rear spring. To adjust it, there should be a little collar like a coilover. So you loosen up that lock ring on the top and then twist your bottom one and then change the preload on the spring. If it's too small of a sag number, you're gonna want to take some tension off of the spring. If it's too high of a sag or the bike is sagging a lot and you're a heavier rider, you're gonna want to put more tension on the spring. Now, your spring rate may be a little bit too high or too low depending on your rider weight. I know a lot of bikes are geared towards like 180, 200 pound riders, sometimes lower, sometimes more. But sometimes you'll reach the limit of the spring rate and you'll have to actually change out springs to get your proper sag numbers. Same with the front suspension. So here I have this red little adjuster, and that is gonna be my preload. So as this winds in and goes down, that puts more load on the spring, causing more spring tension. I'm a lighter rider, so mine is pretty much all the way out, and I actually have to look into getting a lighter spring because I am not getting enough sag in the front here. So again, you're gonna wanna measure your sag numbers just like we did in the rear, just like that. You have suspension travel for a reason. So usually what I do is I'll put a fairly loose zip tie, just tight enough to keep tension on it and from it, you know, actually slipping all the way down. But I'll put a zip tie around the suspension, go for a little bit of a ride, and obviously not slam on the brakes so the front completely collapses. But after that, I'll see how much suspension travel I use. So at that point, if you're only using like half of the travel or you're completely bottoming out, you're gonna wanna change your preload settings like I was talking about, depending on how aggressive you ride as well. Coming to, if you have rebound settings, so this little screw on the inside, similar to coilovers on cars, that's your rebound stiffness. And then some bikes have high and low speed compression settings as well. Usually bikes like this, they'll come with manufacturer suggested settings and you kind of dial it in from there. I know on these Triumph bikes, they have a factory manual telling you kind of a general idea for track or comfort or kind of a more sporty feel where to set the suspension. And in the rear, usually if it's adjustable, you'll see this, there's a compression knob right here to turn it hard and soft. And then there's actually one down there as well that you can adjust. Moving on to the chain, almost as important as the other maintenance. Actually, I would say this is even more important than doing oil changes on a bike. So every, I would say 200 miles or so, you're gonna want to clean and lubricate your chain. So buy a really nice set of chain cleaner and lubricant for that. Sometimes there's a 2-in-1 cleaner and lube that you can use. There's all different brands and stuff, but a lot of newbie mistakes is they'll put their bike on a center stand, lifting the bike up, and they'll come in here with like a towel or something while the bike is running, and they'll have the motorcycle run and start cleaning the chain. And that's how people lose their fingers, because it'll get sucked in here, and yeah. Not a good time, so definitely don't do that. If you want to look up some YouTube videos, tons of people doing that, and not a great thing. So let's move on to fluids. Usually you're gonna have coolant unless it's an air-cooled bike. So mine, you can see it's topped off right there. There's the fill for it. Sometimes you have to actually go up to the radiator and pull the cap and see if there's fluid in there. Checking your oil is very important. So my bike actually has a dipstick right here. You would take off the dipstick and have the bike first on a level surface and make sure that's all good to go. A lot of other bikes will have a sight glass. And again, usually the bikes have to be on a level plane to check that. But checking your oil is very important, because if your motor locks up while you're riding, that is a serious problem. It's not like you could just pull over on the side of the road on a bike. Usually that's locking up the rear tire and causing an accident. So not a great thing. The other thing engine-wise is a lot of European bikes will call for a valve adjustment at specific intervals. So make sure you read your manual and check the valve adjustments. Because if you don't do your valve adjustments, you can burn up exhaust or intake valves, drop valves, and blow up your motor that way. And again, that locks up the rear tire and then you crash. So definitely don't want your motor blowing up, and keeping things healthy and up on your maintenance for that. This one seems kind of obvious, but for naked bikes, a lot of people like to completely remove their mirrors, which in a lot of states you legally have to have rear view mirrors. And on my bike, that took them off. Luckily, still had them. A lot of people will do the tail tidies as well. A lot of bikes come with this big, stupid, ugly fender on the back because it's legally mandated for new motorcycles. They'll leave that on. You could do a tail tidy like this. So it kind of tucks up your turn signals and license plate, and it comes with its own license plate light, so that's kind of cool. Here's the giant stock fender that comes with the bike. Super ugly. So those tail tidies are kind of nice. All right, bonus tip. The rider gear. I had always kind of gone one size up with helmets, and after talking to some cycle gear people at my local cycle gear, they had mentioned that I was always running too loose of a helmet. And fitment guide on a helmet is you want to make sure that when you're putting the helmet on, if you grab the front bar and you can move the helmet around like this, and it's super loose, even though it feels really nice on your head and comfortable, not good for riding, because when you're actually riding, the wind hits it and it starts moving all over the place and doesn't fit right. And if you do crash, it can potentially slip off your head easily, especially if you don't have your chin strap on tight. So get gear that fits you properly. And I actually went one size down in helmet for my new helmet. They are a little bit annoying to break in. They feel super tight if you have the true right size. And a lot of people will get like a basketball or a soccer ball, put it inside the helmet overnight, pump it up a little bit, and it'll kind of expand the foam on the inside of the helmet. And that's one way to break in a helmet that's on the tighter side that actually fits you. So a lot of people just need to go one size down from what they're usually used to. And once that foam breaks in, it'll feel pretty good. I'm a huge fan of these naked bikes. So the bikes without fairings and stuff. And the one thing that kind of sucks for longer rides, I had a FZ09 as well and a DRZ, again, no windshield, is adding a little bit of a windshield or deflector. So these ones are kind of cool, fairly inexpensive, usually like $100 to $150, depending on the bike, but kind of just sits like that and offers quite a bit of wind deflection, especially gets the air off your chest and you can ride for a lot longer in comfort. It doesn't really sacrifice too much the styling of the bike. And in this case, with these bug-eye headlights that are kind of controversial, kind of adds like a little bit of a more sport bike appeal to it. So super handy. If you do have a sport bike and you're obviously leaned over the tank and you have a full fairing, wind isn't going to be as much of an issue. But again, if you're more of an upright position on these naked bikes, especially with these style handlebars, that wind blast hitting in the chest is gonna kind of suck after a couple hours of riding. So these definitely save quite a bit and deflect air more towards your helmet, and your helmet could deal more with that air versus just going completely naked. Probably gonna end up making a part 2 of this video once I figure out a GoPro helmet situation and how to get mic'd up while riding. But I did a similar video on how to drive the Touge, and I'm probably gonna do a similar video on how to ride bikes in the canyon safely and some riding tips. Been riding for almost 10 years and have taken multiple rider safety courses at the local Arizona Harley dealerships and stuff. Great group of people there. I would say if you're gonna get your license, go through one of the motorcycle endorsement courses rather than trying to learn on your own, because it's good to learn from experienced people that know what they're doing versus kind of figuring things out on your own and developing bad habits. And then unlearning bad habits is a lot harder than just learning the correct way from the start. So I'm a huge believer in taking those safety courses. A lot of you especially, are riding dirty with just your permits or expired permits. Not a great move, guys, because you're missing out on a lot of the safety course stuff, and they really have a wealth of information on how to actually ride properly. So I know riding bikes is a cool thing to do, and people are eager to do it, and they bypass a lot of the state mandated safety kind of stuff and getting your license just to start riding immediately. But guys, it's totally worth it and could potentially save your life. The biggest thing on the safety courses is they teach you how to evade emergency situations. So let's say a car pulls out in front of you, or something unexpected comes up in the road, an animal jumps out or something. You're gonna develop muscle memory through that class to know exactly what to do in an emergency stop situation or an evasive maneuver to get around something really quickly, and just better overall riding habits. So again, I would highly recommend you guys take safety courses. But if you guys have any questions in between my next actual riding video, tip video, let me know in the comments. I do most of my own maintenance I had a Ducati, so that probably tells you something, and I did my own maintenance on that thing, valve adjustments and timing belt changes and all that crap. So pretty experienced with that kind of stuff. And again, if you have a mechanical failure on the bike, it's a lot different in the car, because if you're riding, you know, drag a knee in a corner super deep and something mechanically breaks, you're screwed, guys, instead of just taking, you know, an hour to make sure your bike is in perfect working condition. So I will see you guys on the next one. And again, if you have comments, let me know, but see you later.